In 2019, I went on a quest to find organizations that actually made sustainable change. And that quest brought 3 things. First, sustainable, happy, profit. And that's the book, How Products and Organizations, in fact, we can thrive. 2, the Agile Sustainability Manifesto. How can we evolve our craft and guide our decisions? And then 3, the Coalition of the Willing, and I will tell you a bit of that later on. Now, you probably know the warming of our planet, the rather scary predictions, and some of you may have read at least the highlight reports of the latest IPCC. We could be looking at GDP and how, in fact, is not a good metric of a health of an economic system, or how GDP is, in fact, decoupled of the harming emissions. We could also be looking at multiple different variables and the correlation with climate change. But what I don't want to do is feed the overwhelm. I want to bring it down to earth. In sustainability, what we have is a huge feedback delay, and we know how that plays. The longer it takes us to work out if we're going in the right direction, it's more expensive, it's more difficult, or it's less feasible to get there. So imagine this, in sustainability, if we had a magic switch to turn off all the emissions right now, it will take decades, if not centuries, to see what we have already emitted into the atmosphere. So to bring it down to our context, I want to ask us a few questions. How would we harness energy, and how would we store what we learn? I ask this because technology is not an industry anymore, it's a fabric layer of any business. And technology, IT, information and technology needs these 2 things. So if we, technologists, are to uncover better ways to deliver software technology by doing it and helping others to do it, this is the state of affairs. Internet alone, responsible of 4% of the emissions. And what we do is not just internet. We also seen and tried collecting data like there is no tomorrow, and actually it hasn't really taken us to drive better decisions. Our grid is at a stretch, and it cannot cope with the forecast. So how can we better respond to change? The question of how would we make things? And I ask this because we seem to think that in software we live in this abstract world. We've been reminded today as well. We are very bounded to materials, to devices, to the physical world. We are governed by natural laws, regardless if we like it or not, regardless if we are aware of it or not. In our work, we should be looking at increased predictability and reduced risk. So here are some risks. We are already consuming worth of almost 2 planet Earths. I mean, I don't have to remind you, but we only have one. And if everybody was behaving in the way that we do in the tiny slither of the northwest side of the world, we would be at the rate of 5 Earths. We need to be more lean. Now, there is a particular fact on the physical world and our work that really stood with me. And that is that there is more gold in e-waste, right? That stuff like that we no longer use, more gold in e-waste than left on the ground. What are we doing? So this is where I convince you that it's in fact our responsibility and it's in our hands. Because the subject of sustainability, we have this dilemma, these 2 sides of the coins, right? What can we do? Politics, population, individual at the masses. And politics, we know, policies and laws are too slow and have loopholes. And so on that quest in 2019, and for me it's becoming more and more apparent that bang in the middle where we have is the great opportunity. I mean, think about this. We have 249 country codes, 249, versus 333 million registered companies. So organizations can give us the speed, the size, the pace, the volume that we require to make a positive change. And the good thing is that organizations are composed of individuals. And we can do good and we can do well. In fact, it's more rewarding. Also to say that we are incredibly privileged, not just for being here today, but because in our work, we have access and we have ease. We have access to key areas of the organization, and we have ease in terms of skills, tools already under our belt. So it's our responsibility. So I have been turning up and up the volume over the years. Some of you may have seen my April's Fool this year. One which sort of remind me people don't read till the end on the post. But also, we all can take that place. I'm also asking, and more publicly, quite loudly, things that I would expect what Salesforce should be providing at user level and our technology solution level. And also being quite public in open letters and so on to key executives of the mothership into what I would expect that needs to happen. If you are interested, I have some content on that, so just ask me later. One of the things that came out, I don't know if it was end of last year or beginning of this year, is this guide. I'm not gonna ask you to read it. It says version 1 is version 0.1 in my opinion, but there are some things I could not help myself but to tell you. One, the guide tells us that we, Salesforce technologists, we play a critical role on that reduction of emissions. Also, the chief engineering officer tells us that sustainable engineering is just good engineering. And then it goes off and tells us a story of decoupling, removing a dependency of JavaScript between MailChimp and WordPress and the related reduction of emissions. I don't think these two things are tapping into Salesforce infrastructure. So what I want is moving away from anecdotes to actual examples and facts into how we can better improve our instances. I could not help myself but to also show you this part of the guide that tells us that color blue consumes 25% more energy than other colors. Just gonna let you that sink in. Okay. But there are some things already available, and I think this one is one that is not getting enough spotlight, and that's the Carbon Developer Dashboard, Developer Carbon Dashboard. Anyway, you have the QR code there if you're interested. And this is open source, so you can configure and you can tap into it. Basically uses event monitoring and CRMA to show you the consumption of the equivalent emissions for your instance. And then it sort of breaks it down on percentage, either user interface, Apex, or API. So that's a good one. I think regardless which SKUs we have, should be available for us. But anyway, how else can we make natural capital aware solutions? And here is where I introduce you the green software principles. And principles are really helpful to help us guide into better decisions in the way that how we can re-architect our solutions, size them, locate them. Green software foundation champion, and basically these three buckets, so these three principles, is that we should be designing our applications or evolving our applications in a way that they're energy efficient, hardware efficient, and carbon aware. So energy efficient is to use the least as possible energy. We've seen our grid is on stretch. Hardware efficiency is how can we, in our shared infrastructure, use the least carbon embedded. And the last thing is, for the ones that were here last year in the session, is how can we be locally attuned and adaptive in terms of also our carbon. The thing is, if we think of how the grid functions today, our energy grids, is that they have a constant pump of fossils through. And yes, we start plugging in renewables, which is great. Now, the very outrageous truth is that when there are too many renewables, to keep the grid safe, not to get into overheat and overwhelm, the renewables are not stored and get lost. We still pump in the fossil fuels, right? So it's important that when we can tap into clean energy, it's something that we can design. Also to say that policies, laws, regulations, penalties, those things are coming, already happening. And I would argue that maybe 25% of this room, organization, industries, have to be able to start providing their carbon emissions. And that also counts in our work. Each one of us, right? In 2015, Paris Agreement, one of our targets by 2030, we need to halve our emissions. As a globe, as a country, as a weekend sports activity, as a village, as a neighborhood, as a household, as an individual, as a product, as a department, as a Salesforce instance, right? And this is 5 years from now. And so we have no time to waste. How can we halve our emissions? All right. So one of the things that I find quite helpful when tackling this subject to bring down these big ideas into something much more tangible that we can architect in our products is this concept of circular economy. I'm a circular economy professional from Cambridge University, and essentially at actual lightning speed, circular economy is moving us away from the linear detrimental economy where we make waste, right? We take things from Earth, we make something with it, and then we waste it. Instead, what we want to do is close the loop, right? In a way that we keep products and material in use, reduce waste and pollution, and so on. Now, here are some things. There are the model of the 7 R's, 9 R, 11 R's, but some that you can take a picture and start thinking when you're designing an application. How can we refuse? How can we reduce? How can we reuse? Like modular, decoupled components. I mean, it's been around for a long time. 15 years in the Salesforce world. I don't see this enough. Repair, the right of repair is going to become more and more important, right? And we live in this fallacy similar to the architectural physical building work, where we think that bulldozing everything is easier. And then you end up in the same problem further down the line. And also rethink. And here I plot some activities that we see very much. And those are things that we can actively contribute to reduce. Now, slowly, I'm sort of like bringing it down a layer and a layer. So I don't know your instance. I don't know your industry. I can guess a little bit. But I sort of bucketed things that we all can do better. So if we look at first bucket, assets. That's an easy one, right? Things like picture, file type, and size. Videos, don't use them. Certainly not autoplay, and just avoid animations. This is just very simple stuff we all can do. And how about auto retention by design, auto retention by default? Even better, refuse if there is no need, which kind of takes us to the bucket of data. We're hoarding so much data. It's so difficult to let go. And again, we're just collecting all this data that's supposed to drive us to better decisions. We try, it hasn't worked. So not just amount of rows of data, but also attributes and columns. This lives somewhere. It's using rare earth materials. And data, right? The less is more. Also, the warming of the planet, the less is more. And a decade and a half in the Salesforce world, I just see so much post-processing. Things that we do after the fact with a lot of complexity that we could do in another way, so we could just refuse. So much post-processing. So much spaghetti design. I mean, I'm freelance. Sometimes I go to uncover what the spaghetti, why is this behaving in this way? And so much order of execution kerfuffles. And I'm sure you start thinking things, that piece of the application, maybe that thing. So those are the things that we need to take our responsibility and do something about. Also times a day. And I did mention in terms of what's happening in the renewables. So how can we make conscious decision and tap on the excess renewables when they are plentiful? And down here I put, it's tiny, but and that's a site in the UK that you can see what's the mixture of sources in your energy grid. So just tap when renewables are plentiful, and that will change country to country, and are different available sites like this for other places, right? And who are you doing business with? What is your supplier chain? What are their plans to halve their emissions? What about their servers? Which kind of energy are they tapping into? And I've been talking a lot about energy, but it's not just energy. The amount of fresh water that we consume as technologies, we're not only depleting aquifers, but we're taking fresh water from other beings, two-legged and many other legged too, and rare earth materials. Okay, I did say I will talk about the ability family, and there is this school of thought about how can we keep our products healthy. And sort of we look at having maybe 50% of the stuff and the effort that we put out there in terms of visible stuff. And you will always have pressure to increase this 50% to more. But we as stakeholders, we have a stake into what we deliver. So with this school of thought of having healthy products, yes, 50% goes to visible features, but maybe 10% goes to validation and design. And also validation after the fact, right? We imagine we will do this feature and it will give this wonderful guesstimate of something. Are we actually looking after the fact if that happened? Are we learning? Are we taking better decisions with information radiators? The right to refuse? Maybe 20% goes to shifting left in terms of quality assurance, in terms of DevOps, in terms of security, which takes us to the ability family. 20% going into usability, scalability, sustainability, right? By design, and it's up to us. And just to give you a tiny example, not long ago, 15-minute conversations. We were looking at a costume map. How's 5 minutes? A costume map, 15 minutes, the details doesn't matter. We managed to reduce the data tables, the objects, by half. And by doing that, we reduce the potential emissions by almost 70%. We all can take 15 minutes. It's so easy to over-engineer stuff, make things complex. Now, I couldn't not cover this, and maybe product ethics is a session for another year, but how can we move from the hype into, or GPT, into GTP, genuine, trustful purpose? If this interests you, I have facts, options, and other things we can do better in terms of AI and the like, which is a bundle of multiple things. But there you go, right? Because the future is not to be predicted or forecasted. It's to be first imagined so we can create it. And it's really up to us. So, your turn. Remember your privilege. Where do you want the world to go? How do you want to be part of it? What is between then and now? Therefore, what's next? I'm going to give you 3 at lightning speed things. First, head over the Agile Sustainability Manifesto. 4 values, 8 principles. It's time for us to take our craft up a notch. Put your name on it, but most importantly, leverage these things for the trillion decisions that we take every day. 2, Impact Framework is one of the things, as many others, within the Green Software Foundation that is already open source available for you. And in this QR code, you can get a free course on green software. And if you pass the exam, which I'm sure you will, you get this certificate. Very good base level, regardless if you're a dev, consultant, whatever. I highly recommend it. And 3, we have this 4 weeks program of the Coalition of the Willing. and essentially we are on this quest to move people from theoretical agreement, we should do something, into tangible, impactful action, right? This is how, right? Moving people from urgency into agency, and not living just with knowing about circular economy, sustainable development goals, complexity, science, but the how we do it in your context. Now, we don't have time for questions, but I'd love to hear from you. I'm gonna be outside as soon as I pick up the computer and so on. But I do wanna leave you with this thought. This is home. All our conceptual inventions that don't support this home to thrive as a whole, those are flawed. There are no boundaries. We all breathe the same air. This is our home, which is not ours alone.